telling you about the storms because that really happens. And the reason is because if you look at the mountain ranges, you'll see there are like ridges or rifts that work between the mountains, and cold air, particularly in the wintertime, come down those rifts and out onto the sea. And of course the sea, the mountains form like a big bowl around the sea, so all that cold air has no place to go. So it mixes with the hot, humid air, and you get some. I just saw Danny just showed me a picture of his boat that was wrecked. So these stories, you might have a little bit of hard time saying, because today's so placid, you go, wow, I can't imagine that. Imagine it. It can happen. Okay, so I want to read to you from Matthew chapter 14, an event that happened somewhere near where we are right now. So here's the story. Immediately, Jesus made the disciples get in the boat and go ahead of him to the other side. Now you understand that now, don't you? Because we were where Capernaum was in the Mount of Beatitudes, and over there is the other side, right? So you got it. You understand visually what was going on. They're basically sailing across the 8-mile width of the Sea of Galilee. And he dismissed the crowd, and after he dismissed them, he went up on a mountainside by himself to pray. And when evening came, he was there alone. But the boat was already a considerable distance from the land, and was being buffeted by the waves because the wind was against it. And during the fourth watch of the night, Jesus came out to them walking on the lake. And when the disciples saw him walking on the lake, they were terrified. And they cried out, "It's a ghost!" And they were in fear. But Jesus immediately said to them, "Take courage, it is I, don't be afraid." I love what Jesus said. It's I, take courage, don't be afraid. You know the most common phrase in the Bible that the Lord speaks to us, both Old Testament and New Testament, is the phrase, do not be afraid. Fear not. It's used hundreds of times in the Bible. When God appeared to Abraham Abraham, he said to Abraham, I want you to leave your land, leave your people, leave your friends, leave everybody, and follow me. Well, Lord, where are we going? Well, I can't tell you that. Well, Lord, how am I going to provide for myself out there? Well, I can't really tell you that. Well, Lord, who's going to be there to protect me if I need it, on the human level? Well, nobody. And so Abraham was scared, and in a later vision, God appeared to him, and he said, Abraham, I am with you, do not be afraid. When God appeared to Moses in the burning bush and sent him back to Yul Brenner, you know the story, right? Yeah. And Moses was scared. God said to him from the bush, I will be with you, Moses. Do not be afraid. And when he appeared to Gideon and wanted Gideon to lead his 300 men against the enemy, Gideon was terrified, and he said to Gideon, Gideon, do not be afraid, I will be with you. And here to the disciples, do not be afraid, I will be with you. I love Isaiah 43, when you walk through the fire and when you go through the deep water, do not be afraid, for I will be with you. It's one thing to tell people, don't be afraid. It's another thing to tell them why they don't have to be afraid. I love that Jesus just doesn't say, and God just doesn't say to Moses, to Abraham, to you, to me, to the disciples, hey, don't be afraid. Well, anybody can say that. Don't be afraid. It's like when you're taking your kids in for a shot. Don't be afraid. Well, they are afraid. I'm sorry. It's like when I go to the dentist. Don't be afraid. No, you don't get it. No, I've had some horrible experiences with this man. I don't want to go in there, which is why I don't go to the dentist until they need to pull something out of my jawbone, because I don't like it. I am afraid. It's why I don't come in, doc, and get checkups. My doctor's here, Dr. Matthews, because he's a nice man, but I'm still afraid. I don't want to go to the doctor. I don't like it. I don't like people messing with my body. I don't want to know my blood pressure. Leave me alone. Okay, So, it's one thing to say, don't be afraid. It's another thing to tell people something that makes that phrase make sense. And when God says don't be afraid, he tells us something that makes his statement make sense. Don't be afraid. Why? For I will be with you. For I am with you. You know what? When God is with us, we don't need to be afraid. That's why he says to us, do not fear, because when I've got God with me, no one can bother me. No one can hurt me. No one can do anything to me that's not in the will of God and already been reversed, if it's a bad thing, for his glory. So, don't you love that? Most common thing God says to you is, do not fear, for I am with you. Now, that's not the sermon. We're getting there. And Peter said, of course, who else? Peter said, Lord, if it's really you, command me to come to you on the water. And Jesus said, go ahead, come to me. Then Peter got out of the boat and walked on the water and came towards Jesus. Now, this is not possible. People can't walk on water. This is not possible. So Peter's walking on top of the water like Jesus, and he's doing fine, actually, even though it's impossible. He's doing fine, but the Bible says, and then when he saw the wind, he became afraid, and beginning to sink, he cried out, Lord, save me. What did Peter do that was his undoing? He took his eyes off who? Jesus. Off Jesus, and put his eyes where? On his circumstances. That's right. He looked around and he said, shh. He looked around and he said, hey, wait a minute. People can't do this. Nobody can walk on water. Look at that wave. Are you kidding me? You look at that wind. And as soon as he did, the Bible says, down he went. And the Lord reached out. The Bible says that the Lord reached out and grabbed a hold of him and saved him, and said, you of little faith, why did you doubt? You were doing fine, Peter, while you had your eyes on me. You were doing fine while you had your gaze fixed on me. And as soon as you took it off of me and put it on your circumstances, down you went, pal. Why did you do that? Well, that's a good question. Why do you and I do that? It's a good question. And when they climbed into the boat, the wind died down, and then those who were in the boat worshipped him, saying, truly, you are the Son of God. And when they crossed over, they landed at Gennesaret. We're going to be there this afternoon after lunch, where he landed. And when the men of the place recognized it was Jesus, they sent word to all the surrounding countryside, and people brought all their sick to him and begged him to let the sick just touch the edge of his cloak, and all who touched him were healed. You know, sometimes we have the feeling that the miracles in the Bible was only seen by a lucky few. Friends, remember what I told you yesterday? John MacArthur said virtually no one in Israel at the end of 3 years hadn't either witnessed a miracle personally or known someone who did. Here he goes over there, the crowds come. How many people? I don't know. Hundreds of people, maybe thousands of people, came. How many people show up to these healing meetings that Benny Hinn has or whatever? Thousands of people, and Jesus healed them all. He healed them all. Don't let anybody tell you the reason you're not healed is because you don't have enough faith. No, Jesus doesn't heal because of your faith. He heals because of his will and power. I'm sure many of these people weren't believers. He healed them anyway. Okay? If he's not healing you, it's because the will of God is not for you to be healed right now. But it's a terrible guilt trip. My sister-in-law died of cancer when she was 27. And everybody wrote her and said, if you only had more faith, God would heal you. So on top of dealing with cancer, they piled all this guilt on her that she didn't have enough faith. It was cruel. They didn't mean to be cruel, but it was cruel. That had nothing to do with why she wasn't healed. It was God's will. God could have healed her with a thought. Okay? So he healed all these people out in the open air for everybody to see. And they all saw it. Now, let's go back to the so what of what we're talking about.